And we're live. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am your lovely host, Rin, from Rin's Art Cafe. And with me today, I have Ibn, Orator. Before we begin, I would like to give out a disclaimer. If you don't like the topics that we're about to discuss in this video, you may please leave and watch something else. And when commenting, please keep it civil and respectful in the comment section. Thank you very much. And don't forget to share the video, like, subscribe, and click the bell so you guys get notified for any other videos that might be coming out. So, Ibn, tell us a bit about yourself. Who is Ibn?
Um, Ibn is a very short-handed reference to the person I aspire to be to the public, and the person I aspire to be to the world and to young influencers who will take on the mantle once I return to dust and return to whatever made me. And I've created this idea by proxy of me to further employ myself into truth and to the philosophy of life. And I was born here in New Haven, Connecticut, of a father who was from Trinidad and Tobago, and my mother who is from here. And I have a very huge family. I have 4 sisters and 1 brother. We grew up in a very Islamic influenced home, specifically following the Nation of Islam and their teachings, to which I can attribute a lot of my piety and or pious kind of love that I have for people is from growing up in that place and in that home. And I can keep rambling, but I don't really like to ramble about myself. So if you have any more specific questions as to who I am, more than happy to answer.
All right. So, I'm from Suriname, and Suriname and Trinidad have like a connection in a way. So, yeah, I know a bit, but not that much. But thank you. So what do you do?
I do music. I've been doing music since I was roughly about 9. And there's a long history in that, where I had the early stages of me doing music was centered around me and my brothers, what people I refer to as my brothers, are actually my nephews. And we were in this R&B group called Nonfiction when we were younger. It was very cute. And we had a lot of aspirations in that. Essentially, we began to split, I think, around the age of 13. One of the brothers, who was always into dancing, pursued mostly dancing and singing. Another brother produced editing and really like identifying himself with that. And then I myself, eventually when I went into high school, I started to sing more around my junior year. And then after I graduated high school, I got into hip hop. And there's a long history in that too. So I guess I would classify the kind of music that I do to be avant-garde hip hop meets political and Gnostic views, trying to put words to my own personal experience, and thus rendering out my own personal experience as a commentary on our shared world, since I am a part of the world and the world is a part of me. So that is what a lot of my music is based on, and a long list of many topics that I like to tackle. And I've worked for a very long time to tackle those topics and issues unapologetically outside of the confines of some of what's been rendered as taboo from some of the religious practices that I grew up in. And yeah, that's what I do. And I also like to uh, do a lot of introspective healing as well. As you know, I tend to do a lot of that work on social media because I'm also doing it behind closed doors, and I try to give people relationship advice, life advice, and tools where they can empower themselves emotionally and not see their emotions as a an imprisonment that
Or a
can be
burden.
or burden, yeah, or burden. Um, yeah, so that's I guess that's to sum up what I do or what I aspire to do.
What are the topics that you're most passionate speaking about?
Um, I I like to speak on a lot of issues concerning the African American plight here in America. Um, I like to uh, oh, this just disappeared. I don't know if you disappeared or
The connection glitched a bit. That's
got you.
that's what sometimes happens here. Like the connection isn't that
Got you.
good.
I got so scared. I was like, oh, what's happening here? Oh my God. Yeah.
Technical difficulties.
But yeah, I like to speak on a lot of domestic issues involving relationships in the Black community since I have been a huge participant in the plight of that. I'm a product of my environment, and I grew up in communities of which um, are depraved of any sort of humanity that they have come to find for themselves or have been given the chance to find for themselves. And I like to speak on those issues and what plagues those communities because I grew up in those communities. I also I actually don't remember what the question was. I hope I'm answering the right question. Uh, you asked me what. Well, okay, gotcha. Um, yeah, and I also
Did
yeah. Go
you
sorry.
move from the Caribbean to the U.S. or were you already were you born in the U.S.?
I was born in the U.S. I was born here in New Haven. Um, I don't uh, and I don't know. We could probably get into it maybe later in the interview, but I have a bit of a strange belonging with Trinidad because of the relationship I have with my father has been very severed. I am what's been deemed as a first generation child on my father's side in regards to growing up here in America, and I'm just now understanding where the ties are severed between being essentially an immigrant to this country versus being someone who was born in it, and how that sort of complicates the bond, or how it can complicate the bond between father and son, or mother and son, or father and daughter, and or mother and daughter. So uh, I'm working to figure out how I can draw back to that lineage in a way that communicates to me that I am that too. Um, yeah. Hope that wasn't long winded. I think I was just yeah.
No, it's all right.
Okay.
So I've been checking out your YouTube channel as well, and one of my favorite videos is horse on a trampoline. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, so the horse on trampoline is essentially a soliloquy of thoughts centered around how I would feel ostracized by the question of, "Hey, are you still doing music?" right? And I would feel ostracized because typically it would come with this enthusiasm that's very performative. It to note the idea that like this person has been involved enough to be intrigued by your work, but not involved enough to see that not involved enough to know that that you've been doing music for so long and you haven't stopped. And therefore, if they were paying attention to whatever I was doing, they wouldn't ask such a question. If anything, they would ask, how's music coming along versus if you're still doing music. And what that question sets up, what I felt at the time, the question sets up is this, hey, are you still having dreams about a unicorn farting in Gandhi's mouth? Is that what you're doing? Like you need to get checked. You clearly are. There's something wrong with like your manhood and your legitimacy when it comes to being a citizen in this country. Like you need to be of the working class. You need to do all these different things that are rendered as normal.
Like the stereotypical working a 9 to 5 job, or yeah, something like that.
Yeah, or essentially what's associated with like the social norm to chase capital and to endouse who you are in that pursuit is something that I feel would if art when art comes into play, it seems like it challenges that kind of social climate and or political climate or capital climate and says, hey, but there's something more than whatever intrinsic value is attached to the current society at hand. And I felt that way based off in knowing that nobody really asks you if like, hey, are you still working your job? Are you still working at McDonald's? Are you still working at your hotel? Are you still working at this? Are you still working at that? Nobody asks you that because they already expect that of you. So it says something to when you are asked the question, hey, are you still doing music? Because it feels like what it's ultimately asking you is, hey, are you still going rogue from the norm? Uh, and also if you are, why? Like, why don't you just fit in, right? And it's nice. I don't necessarily feel that way now, but that's what inspired the song. And I think also uh, as you can see, the ambiguity of the message of the video also centered around mental illness in regards to how I feel there's a similar line drawn when with how artists and those who are mentally ill are ostracized from the collective experience and risk the potential of not being seen because of what they do. Um, it's a lot of, and that's a more of a broader message to distill that I don't feel equipped to do now within the time that we're giving in this interview. But I was trying to draw into that world as well, and why it's just wrong to do that.
Hmm. Like usually, when I talk with people, they're not so enthusiastic. Well, they are enthusiastic about their art, but art isn't really seen as something serious or a music career or something like that. Even though the resources are there are resources for people who are seeking that. Um, it itself, people. I'm not saying they're not interested, but it's usually not looked as a way of, well, that you can earn something like as a stable job or something like that. It's more something of passion, even though
Yeah,
uh, people need musicians, people need animators, but what you usually hear about is the people doing work on YouTube or street artists or something like that. Like that's what they picture in their mind when you talk about artists or
yeah,
musicians. They don't think about the other stuff. So
yeah.
how do you
And sorry.
so how do you I wouldn't say change their view on it, or I would say how do you talk to people about it so they get more of an understanding of the situation?
Well, art in itself is a conversation. It's it's a conversation that that is intersectional. It can be in person, it can be from afar, um, it can be all of the above. It raises questions as much as it gives answers. It reveals like problems in our society as much as it reveals solutions, and so on and so forth. So I also want to be clear that I'm not under the illusion that art hasn't been respected overall. I think I was just drawing into how it's still deemed in this weird pocket of society, uh, um, carrying the burden of not being viewed as essential, or as equally as essential to everything else. And as much as we praise the art for what it does for our lives, and what it does for our escape, and what it does to reveal us in whatever way, shape, or form we come, it still seems to be a very radical thing to do that is not initially rendered as necessary up until you reach a certain status where it's approved by everyone. Otherwise, you risk the chance of being seen as the unicorn or black sheep of the group, just inherently off of the practice of art. And I guess a way to talk to people about that um, is to build platforms where we can discuss our identity, um, and discuss it unapologetically, however intersectional that may be, because our existence is art in many ways. And if we understand that, then if we understand that and accept that wholeheartedly, then I feel art would begin to be seen in different lights that it has the potential to be seen in.
Because I've seen recently, due to the current circumstances, people are going more towards art, actually.
Yeah.
We're stuck in our homes all day, and we're on social media. More artists are being seen, and their uh, their work is being noticed. Have
Yeah.
you noticed, like, uh, getting more views on YouTube, or people talking to you more about what you do?
Um, I've noticed it only when I've been intentional about promoting it. And I also, just to be clear, I want to also note that obviously art has been used historically as a great device to contest political norms, to contest political establishments and institutions, and in that regard, it has been very, very deemed as essential in many lights. And I think the reason why art is being relied on so heavily now, as it has been before, when there was any civil unrest in the past here in America or in any other parts of the world, is because it's in communion with a kind of universal power that challenges us to see ourselves in fragments of each other. And because obviously, with all of what's going on with George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, the Ahmaud Arbery's, all the Black bodies that have essentially been rendered invisible in many regards, art is being used as a device to amplify the existence of these people who have been reduced to hashtags, numbers, and statistics.
Something people can hold on to, something they can see, and basically not just see themselves in, but see who they want to fight for, in a sense.
Yeah.
And especially since everybody is stressed, tired, and they're basically out of it. they're using art to express themselves, or even viewing other people's art as a way to cope with these situations and the things going on.
Yeah.
Do you believe that we're going into like a, I wouldn't say a renaissance, but like a shift in the way people think about art, music, comedy, maybe?
Um, uh, Sorry, give me a second. I think that uh, I don't know if you froze, but I'm going to answer the question anyway, just since it's still going live. I think um, that there are many shifts taking place, as there have always been, both quiet and overt. And I think that what we're seeing now, if it was to be held in any light of a renaissance, is more of the knowing that we have always been in a shift towards something, or away from something. Um, and I think we're because of the civil unrest with Black people, and the experiences of Black people in this country, um, we because that's sort of coming to a kind of a head. I think we're seeing more and more why we should pay attention to it. It goes without saying, though, however, that there's a lot to scrutinize, or a lot to be vigilant of during this time as well, and during the times of the shifts, because there are a lot of opportunists who don't necessarily have, our best interests at heart when it comes to being a humanitarian and being within the work of philanthropy, and within the work of giving instead of taking. Like, there seems to be a lot of institutions that are trying to capitalize off of these Black bodies, by now hopping on the bandwagon of like, oh yes, right, systemic racism. How could I forget? Yeah. Systemic racism, support systemic racism. Yeah. And you're starting to see this on multiple platforms, and it does sort of raise the eyebrow of why now. I mean,
Yeah, why do they now pay attention? And
yeah,
I've also seen like influencers taking pictures. I mean, you're helping the cause, but you're looking for clout as well.
yeah,
Let's face it. You're not you don't have people's best interests at heart, even if this might actually help, since they might be really popular, or have a huge following, but they themselves don't know the history behind all of this and why it is happening. This has been something that has been in the making for hundreds of years, basically.
yeah, really.
And the last cases were merely just the collection of the last cases were merely just the breaking point for all that has happened.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what to believe during this time. I'm just trying to cling myself to truth as much as possible. But I don't know. But when I immerse myself in the idea of belief, being Black in this country, I then have to acknowledge that, what has been imposed on us to believe, and in many regards throughout history, has rendered us invisible, and I'm tired of being invisible. So I'm trying to cling to truth, and however it presents itself, as much as possible. Um, yeah.
Where do you want to go with what you're doing? Like, what do you want to do in the future, or how do you want to grow?
I want to step into a new form of leadership that's not that doesn't have to uh, come from a place where the ego is working to mystify what speaks for itself. I want to, and right now I've been studying a lot of Black radicals who have contested the theology of Christian dogma and the doctrines of Christian dogma as it has been presented through white supremacy. And I'm, studying people like Toni Morrison, James Baldwin, Nikki Giovanni, um, so many other great people who, in some way, shape, or form, have worked to validate Black consciousness unapologetically. So I'm trying to step into leadership at this point in my life in a different light that relies on truth to speak for itself. And I'm realizing at this age that I can't save the world, but I can save the people who will work to save the world. And those people are like the youth, like those people are
They're gonna
anyone.
be our future. We're gonna be the next generation who's gonna be in charge.
Yeah, you're the future, like, and that will always be the case whenever one generation is leaving and one generation is coming in. So we have to make sure that in light of leadership that we're employing the next generation to pick up where we left off. And that's what I'm trying to do. And that's what I want to do. And that's why I'm researching to arm myself to the best of my ability to contest the system at hand. Yeah.
And from what I've been seeing, people with a similar goal as you have actually how should I say this? Like, people are listening now. Change is happening.
Yeah.
And if uh, more people like you, because of more people like you, uh, other people gain that confidence to make the change. They were open to listening.
Yeah.
And actually making a choice. So I thank you for that.
No problem. I think we influence each other, even if we're not aware of that. Like, we have a very hive-like existence on this planet. So we're constantly, everyone is bringing someone somewhere. That's the reality. And so I thank you, and my appreciation.
You're welcome. Because I was watching some shows on Netflix and reading some stuff. They were there's a specific one, Midnight Gospel. I'm not sure if you heard about that one. There's this guy. He has like a podcast, and he talks to everyone from different universes, different dimensions, wherever else he goes to. I'm not sure what it's called, but there was this one where he was in this prison of existential dread or something like that. And they were talking about everybody's consciousness in a way being connected. And like you said, we in a way influence each other. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And you were talking about a book you were working on.
Yes. I don't want to announce the name yet because I don't want it to be stolen. Not from you, but just from whoever. It's very
Whoever
sacred.
is watching it. You don't have to name anything, just so people stay tuned for it. So they're like,
Yep. Yeah. So the book is going to be an exploration of Black trauma, um, as it works to grow into a stream of consciousness that is all loving and all knowing of itself. And it's going to be very autobiographical in that regard, as it is centered around my own personal experience. and connection to what I said earlier, how my experience is a commentary on our shared world, just like your experience is commentary on our shared world. But I'm trying to uh, douse myself into that specifically more with Black people, because I feel like um, we need to be encouraged to validate our trauma here in this country, and we need to be encouraged to validate that, and knowing that it whether institutions or corporations or establishments of any kind say that it is real, doesn't matter. It is real enough to render us here, in however way it has come to render us here, in whatever forms it may be, whether it be through queer identity, whether it be through uh, non-binary identities, whether it be through religious identities, whether it be through non-religious identities, whether it be through any kind of identity, is what the book is going to be centered in. Because I want my people to know that I love them, and I want the world to know what that love can look like if it's allowed to manifest through the rest of the world.
That sounds good, actually. Like, the moment you release the book, I'm gonna interview you again. You
Thank
know, because yeah, I feel that more people need to look into stuff like this and read up about it and see how your point of view as well, because you're gonna talk about it like on a personal level, and I feel that people are really gonna connect with you.
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, yeah, we'll see. We'll see how that plays out.
I saw you mentioned you edited an interview reel for Ogechi's film Friction. Can
Yeah.
you tell us a bit about that?
Yes. So Ogechi Musa is a director, writer, producer, and lead actress in her own film titled Friction, which is centered around police brutality and active protest, revolt. Um, and the movie goes into the complexities essentially that could be rendered as, as the approach of either Malcolm X or the approach of Martin Luther King, as we all like to say. Like Martin Luther King was more of the peaceful one, and Malcolm was more of the militant one. Even though both of the lines, if you do more of your research, you'll actually quickly realize that those lines can be skewed for either or irreversibly. I mean, interchangeably. I mean, and so yeah, it takes place in trying to tell that story in regards to these characters that Ogechi wrote out very well, where um, it's centered around a character named Elle that she plays, in which her brother was killed by police brutality, and you begin to see throughout the entire film that she's working to get justice while the ethics of her humanity is being tested, not just by the system and what systemic racism has done, but also by her peers and protests who are more radical and saying, "Hey, let's actually get justice and kill these people. Like, let's forget the peaceful revolt. Let's forget that. That's played out. We got to do this, right?" Like, there is a character in the story that is sort of more on the militant side of justice, and knowing that his brother was lost to police brutality is also what's like sort of driving his vengeful spirit to being more in that direction, outside of the very trying nature of this kind of work. Um, and Ogechi herself, if you get a chance to look at the interview reel, and whoever is watching this, if they get a chance to look at it, she goes more into detail as to what exactly inspired that film personally. Um, and I'd much rather you hear that from her than from me, since that's her story. Um, and and I think I would like to also say that Ogechi is one of those people who utilizes her art to really, really, really dive into empathy, and she utilizes that uh, until the wheels fall off. Like, she's all about empathy, um, especially when it comes to Black people. So if any of you get the chance to check out any of her work, any of her films, any projects that she's doing at all, you will not regret it. She's a very, very, very beautiful person, in all regards whatsoever. Um,
I
yeah,
heard her in the interview reel. I heard her say she wanted to be that voice for people who wanted to speak up about stuff like this, and she wanted to amplify their voices in a way. And I think that's a really beautiful thing to do, because in a way you're lifting up the people in your life, the people who need that voice,
yeah,
because people might not listen to them in and listen to their experiences and what they might be struggling with. So, and to have someone like that is amazing.
yeah, most definitely, most definitely.
So, do you have a specific message for the younger generation?
Upon employing yourself in leadership during this time, you may come to a point where the message that you're trying to convey uh, festers in you so loudly that you will see that there's no other message worth conveying. And what I will challenge you to do in that is to make sure that that does not turn into ego, uh, of any kind, that further shuts everyone out, especially your loved ones and your friends who have been there for you through thick and thin. As you step into leadership, and as you step into uh, the yielding of your power to the words that you use when you are doing PSAs, when you are doing appearances, make sure that you keep in mind that we have all been victims to this system, and no one is above that reality. So know that your work is to save humanity from itself, and know that your work is not to condemn humanity for what it has done, but to vastly be critical of the atrocities that have taken place here in this country and here in the world, and in ourselves. Be transparent, love.
Uh, I'm a bit busy with the interview. Oh,
You're fine. I was just gonna say,
yeah.
be the leader that that you know you are, and be the leader that um, that also knows that the work is never done, and be the leader that moves and love that that is both fiery and or calm, and be unapologetic about it in that regard. I
I
guess that's
see. People tend to forget that we're all human. We're
yeah,
all shaped by our environment. We had to adapt.
yeah,
We have we've rationalized our own reasons why we do the things we do. Stuff that we got with us at birth were genetic things and that either aided in our environment or not.
yeah,
And even though we won't be able to understand everything in our lifetime, but the fact that we get that chance to learn about people, to be open, you don't have to accept everything or all the information that comes to us from every single corner because we live in a world where everything's available, but at what cost? Or what do you want to take in or something like that? We have to be really selective about this and know what we're fighting for.
yeah.
But through understanding each other, we can work towards getting. Sorry,
Okay.
I just lost my train of
Yeah,
thought there. Yeah, because we're constantly working on our future, but there's a thing that I'm a bit afraid of. Even if I might not be here anymore, humanity as a species is a species with amnesia. And all the effort and all the work we put in here, I'm afraid that it might get lost. All our messages, all the stuff we wrote down, because if you look throughout history, some of the stuff that was written down by the ancient Greeks, ancient Egyptians, they weren't really kept up that well, but now we are actually looking back to find old scriptures, old texts, to see what their understanding was back then and what messages they had. But I hope that all of this doesn't get lost in a way, that people know what we were fighting for. Because I've noticed that in some schools in the US, they don't. This is something I heard. This is not something I've actually researched. That not everything is being taught. It's just it differs from state to state, but they selectively leave certain things out, or they mention it briefly, but they don't want to talk about it. And I believe that's problematic because you can't learn from your mistakes if you don't know what those mistakes were.
right.
Like it's like starting from ground zero and then working your way up again. But for the younger generation, that's not helpful.
No, it's not. And yeah, what a play on words to say amnesia, because it can be seen as such. And yeah, we have to know our history. We really have to know our history. We have to understand the intersectionality of that history as well. It can't just be a monolith scope of which we're looking through a tunnel. right? History is more like a a a bold cut diamond with like many spectrums to it. Like it's there's so much. There's so much, and I think anyone who's stepping into leadership um, needs to know what they're doing it for. What cause are you fighting for? And then hone in on that unbiasedly with the research that you choose to do. And I think, yeah, and the concern of whether or not it will get lost. I think a lot of people, a lot of people who have been deemed as radicals, who have lived a life of altruism, uh, have at some point in time had that fear, or have at some point in time have felt a bit dismayed or discouraged from that reality. Is that like, how many ears will I touch? How many hearts will I touch? How many people will I reach? You know, and we never know. We never know how many people we reach. We just hope that the message is seen for what it is, and then and we also hope that for ourselves we're seen for what we try to give to the world. Um, but because we'll never know, it's important that we figure out what drives us to that passion for ourselves, and figure out a way for that to hold us uh, as we do that work. I do want to say too, another message I want to give to men during this time, and young men, young boys who will grow into men. We have a lot of inherent work to do, not because um, we are any more evil or bad intention, bad. Um, Not because we're any more evil or any more um, brain farting. I'm so sorry. I think what I was working to say, that for young boys who are growing into men, uh, you have to really challenge how your role has been established in a very patriarchal society, and you have to be coherent on how your position vastly differs from where women have been placed in this country, um, and in the world. Period. I think we have to essentially listen to women, and listen to how they have seen the world. This is not to be confused with like we should just like inherently, take on any wrongdoing just because we're trying to do the work of what it means to listen to women, right? But what I'm saying is we should have a fundamental base approach to recognizing the world through a woman's eyes, because they truly know the truth. It's not that we don't know truth, but they know a kind of truth that they've
They
been.
have their own
Yeah,
perspective of the situation,
yeah,
other than that of a man's point of view.
yeah. That they've been forced to sit in. You know, my partner, when we first got together, I used to think that some of the arguments that she would bring up to my attention were trivial. I was sitting, me and her were sitting down on a train one time, and my legs were open, and she had pointed out that I was man spreading. I've never heard of man spreading before in my entire life, ever. It was a whole new concept to me. So when she said it to me, I got immediately infuriated, because I'm not. There's no one next to me. There's no. I'm not doing this out of some outwardly disdain for women or for
I
anyone
have
around.
absolutely no idea how manspreading became like an actual thing, and with negative uh
What I was
Think
about to
about it.
say, what I was about to say was that I I initially dismissed it as trivial and just working to start a fight because I knew that whatever narratives were being told about men and in regards to patriarchal society, I knew that I myself at my core had led a life that wasn't necessarily like exclusively like with that kind of practice. So I didn't feel it was fair to sort of group me with like the corrupt nature of manhood that's going on in the world because I at my core wasn't doing that. Have I had some really toxic like erred ways involving like toxic masculinity in the past? Of course I have, right? But I knew that my pursuit had differed from many of my male counterparts and what I was being told a lot of men around me were doing to other women. I knew that I wasn't doing half of the stuff that they were doing, right? But then I realized, as trivial as it appeared on the surface, the reality is it wasn't because I never had to think about how I sit down, but women have. I didn't understand that at first. I didn't understand you you can't possibly imagine what it does to your quality of life to be told how to sit. And I have never had to worry about that. So once I understood that, then it opened up a completely different um, navigation in my mind and in my being. That perhaps what a lot of women are saying is that on every microscopic level, they've had to second guess themselves.
Am I doing this right? Am I doing that right?
Am I doing that?
What's appropriate for when I'm going outside?
Yeah. So it's a world of difference. So the message I also want to give to young boys who are going to grow into men is to 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 try to move past your initial reaction to some of the arguments that may come up within feminist movements, uh, and really humble yourself to see what exactly is being presented. It doesn't mean that that even after when you come out of on the other side, that if you deem that it's not necessary, that you have to force yourself to believe it's necessary, right? But I'm essentially saying that don't dismiss it as trivial because more often than none, 9 times out of 10, it's not. It's actually it's just that it's probably deemed as trivial because we as men have never had to think about any of this stuff ever.
People usually don't bring that stuff up when it comes to men. Like what I've seen, it's usually being told to women, except in a few cases that I've seen. Uh, I had a teacher that would treat us like when we were children as equal, like boys and girls were equal. Like it wasn't like girls have to sit in a certain way and guys can do whatever, but they were like uh, he was treating everybody equally. He said like everybody has to sit in a in an appropriate way.
Yeah,
Like he didn't want to discriminate, and he didn't want the guys to think they can do anything just because they're not women or just because the rules don't apply to you.
yeah,
In a way, it's teaching discipline, but also in a way you're letting the women see the guys see from the women's point of view.
yeah. And I think and saying all of this, I want to make sure I also say to young leaders that one of the things that this country suffers from is actively working to not see our differences while capitalizing on those differences for the sake of profit. So make sure that when you're stepping into leadership, don't fall into the pipe dream and or a trap door of the blindness to the inherent differences that we all have as people. And as you work um, fight for equality, right? Because this country and it being comprised of white delusion and white supremacy navigates a very pseudo system of morale, and it constantly preaches this message of equality that on the surface seems like it's a all inclusive thing, but it's actively working to dismiss our differences that it has also actively profited off of for hundreds and hundreds of years. And if we're not aware or cognizant of our differences, then the ignorance of our differences will consume us into oblivion and to death.
It's like where the people say, "I don't see color." That's like,
Yeah, exactly. You
I
know,
mean, like, you can't just say that. We need to accept each other for their differences. We need to love each other and their differences,
yes, exactly.
and not like look at it as like something you haven't seen before, or you're
Yeah,
just not going to talk about it and you're just going to ignore it.
yeah.
It
Doesn't
doesn't help us grow as people. It sets us further back because we won't want to understand the other person and their perspective and stuff like that. In a way, we're looking at the situation in a narrow way, and we won't get anywhere with that point of view.
yeah, we won't at all. Um, yeah, so don't fall prey to that. Don't fall prey to the narrative that we don't have differences, because we do.
We need to embrace them.
We need to embrace them. Yeah, like what someone doesn't have, another person can provide. That's why differences
In a
exist.
way, for instance, use your privilege to help someone else, and not just be like, "Oh my God, I have privilege. I'm a terrible person." That's not, you can't do that. That's not a way of helping someone.
Yeah,
First of all, you're making yourself look bad, and second of all, it doesn't help the situation at all.
yeah, it doesn't, and yeah, we just have to see. We have to see everything. That's it's really that simple. And I'd love to drop a whole bunch of historical facts on you and start to make this a history lesson 101. But the reality is that while you're doing that research, you'll come back to the same truth. It's actually quite simple. Um, it's simple. Don't.
People have to put in the effort to learn.
Yeah, we have to put in the effort to learn.
Because even if there are like so many videos out there explaining all of this stuff and discussing this, you yourself need to also do research on history and stuff like that.
Yeah,
You shouldn't, because I've seen people say, you should get educated on the topic, you should learn more, but they don't really provide like something the viewers can grasp or hold on to, like this is what I'm going to be studying or looking up or learning about the situation.
right, right.
Thank you.
And yeah, and I think I don't want to confuse anybody, but I want to say that the more you research the complexities of life and the complications of life, the more eventually you're gonna have different checkpoints where you realize exactly just how much it has always been simple. I hope that doesn't sound too oxymoronish, because how can complex and or complicated things be simple? But that the more you research, the more you'll begin to see a pattern in our human endeavor that renders a lot of our existence simple,
In a,
and that
we
simplicity.
can learn from those mistakes other
Yeah,
people made in the past.
yeah,
and work on bettering the situation.
Yeah.
Because I like the fact that people came together to fight against fight for a cause and against police brutality and the system. But it can get a little out of hand, especially when people don't do enough research or have a good grasp on these issues.
Yeah. And the last thing I would like to note is that this is not how my face looks. Okay, I've been insecure about my face, the way the camera is mirroring my face ever since I started this interview, folks.
I'm already used to this. Like,
And the camera switched my face from to the opposite end, so it looks like I'm like it's okay. I'm insecure about this right now. So much I know.
you don't have to worry. So, is there anybody else you want to work with in the future?
Um,
Anything that's coming up?
it's not really much coming up per se, other than knowing that I am working on a book, and also I will be doing more PSAs. I will be doing more uploads. I will be continuing to advertise Ogechi's interview reel on behalf of her film Friction. And anyone who would like to follow my work or come along with me as I'm exploring myself, as I'm learning myself, as I'm breathing life into myself, feel free to follow me on Instagram. It's IBN as in Nancy underscore ORATOR. And please follow me on YouTube and subscribe, comment, like, and share as much as you possibly can, because I want my work to be seen as the work of all of us, and I want it to be shared because it is for all of us, in one way, shape, or form. Um,
I linked everything in the description below, so if
for,
anybody wants to check it out, you just click the link and you'll be right there.
yeah, and I apologize to anyone who's listening if I was a bit long-winded when I was rendering certain answers. I'm yeah, a little bit foggy today. So, but I thank everyone for listening. I am immensely humbled that I'm even being seen, and I'm honored that I'm being seen. So,
And I'm sure that everybody that's going to watch this video, well, maybe not everyone, but the people I know will like you a lot.
I appreciate that. Yeah,
You will inspire a lot of people. Trust me.
I hope so.
So, yeah. And hopefully we get to speak another time after you put something new out, or and I'm uploading my video. I mentioned Ogechi's film in it, and I talked a bit about some of the stuff. So stay tuned for that as well. And we'll be waiting on what else you have to show us, Ibn. And maybe
Yeah,
we'll be on a podcast on your channel if you want to.
yeah, maybe we'll see.
Part one.
I don't wanna announce too many things that are not either in work already in working progress yet,
And
or
maybe in the future somewhere.
yeah. But in the future, I will be continuing to grow and do different things and adapt.
You're
As
gonna start taking it one step at a time first.
exactly, yeah, one step at a time.
All right. Thank you for giving me your time for this interview.
No problem. I'm honored. As soon as you say he's gonna interview me, I was just like, what? Like
Oh,
I'm so
I'm
honored.
glad that you feel honored.
Absolutely. It's a delight. Like, yeah. So thank you. Thank you.
You are welcome. So, guys, that was it for today's interview. Make sure you guys like, subscribe, and share the video as much as you can. And when commenting, please be respectful. All right? So see you guys next time, and hopefully we'll have Ibn on here again.
I'd be delighted to be too.
Right. See you guys later. Bye, guys.